All right, good evening, everyone. With a quorum of members present, I'll call the Finance Committee for Tuesday, December 13th, 2022 to order. We'll note that all still have a quorum. The first item on our agenda is the minutes of our previous meeting from 11/22 of 22, copies of which are in the packets. Any revisions necessary for the minutes? If not, I'll take a motion to approve them. Motion by Martin, second by Dinny. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries. Item number 2 is discussion and possible action regarding a budget modification for street improvements for Franklin Street in the amount of $24,668.11. Let me switch back to the packet. And so where are we at? Oh, here's the item. Okay, so we basically have a line item transfer from signs and maintenance to street maintenance to accomplish that that payment. Is there any question on that item at all?
I would move to approve item 2.
Okay, motion to approve from Dinny. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Martins. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? None are opposed. That item carries as well. Discussion and possible action on the city's waiver of first right of refusal to repurchase the property at 7555 Stewart Avenue. And this is standard in the business campus that if we, as property is changing hands, we have the restriction that we can exercise the right to purchase the property back if we have a use for it. Normally, we don't. And so you've got the materials in the packet there. Does anyone have any questions on this particular item? Is there a motion then to waive our first right of refusal to repurchase?
I'll make that motion.
Motion from Martin, second from Dinny. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No one's opposed. That motion carries as well. Item 4 is discussion and possible action regarding amending the cost of living adjustment date for general employees to start on pay period 1 due to the workday implementation. And we've got some supporting info on that as well. We've previously approved that increase, and we did budget for it, correct? So this would make it a little easier, though, I think, to chart in the new software if we begin right away with the calendar here. Does anyone have questions at all on that item? If not, I'll take a motion to approve the item. Motion by Denny, second by Martins.
Yeah, and I'll just add
Go ahead.
that this also passed HR committee yesterday.
Okay, perfect. So then that'll go on joint recommendation too then. Additional questions? Comment? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries as well. Item number 5 is discussion and possible action regarding a letter of support for the Wausau Central Wisconsin CVB's request for ARPA grant from Marathon County. You'll recall a few weeks ago, Tim White was at the council meeting and he was talking about applying to Marathon County for a ARPA-funded grant to assist them with developing a new visitor center. And he was looking for the city to draft some type of supportive correspondence in hopes of reinforcing his grant prospects. We were working, I guess the staff was working internally on figuring out the best way to provide that support. They felt that maybe the most professional way to do it was by resolution, that we would pass the resolution encouraging our peers at Marathon County to consider support of that grant because it promotes tourism in the area. And so, you know, were we to pass that type of communication, it really would represent, you know, both this committee and the council, and obviously the mayor along with us, voicing that support really with, in a documented way. So I guess, does anyone have questions about that? Mayor, come on up.
I just wanted to make sure you were having a relevant discussion because I know at the County Finance Committee, they discussed this today at 3.
Okay.
They discussed it. They haven't made any decisions yet, so it is still relevant. That's all
Okay.
I'm here to tell you.
That's good. So hopefully we're not too late then. So if they're willing to discuss it a second time before they act, maybe we can get our document in there. So does anyone have questions on this? Go ahead.
So in the packet, so the indication is that this center would be improved or built in Rib Mountain, so it's not necessarily in Wausau, what we're.
Correct. I think it's the
Providing.
Shakey's property.
Right.
Yep.
You're right. Okay.
Yep. And so then obviously as one of the, you know, key beneficiaries of room tax dollars and tourism, Tim was hoping that the city and even our surrounding municipality neighbors would support him in his ask to Marathon County to get some help. So
I would move to support the ARPA grant
Okay.
letter to the county.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll
Second by
that.
Martins. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries as well. Okay, and so that brings us to item number 6, which is discussion and possible action regarding a request for budget modification for new firefighter equipment and training costs. You'll recall a while back, we approved some ARPA funding for new firefighters, and we've obviously then, since then, gotten that SAFER grant, and we've given the chief the authority to go out and find us 12 new firefighters. So he's diligently working on finding all of the right people. Obviously, when you hire new people, they need gear. And so along comes this request so that they will be furnished with the same equipment, safety equipment, as their peers when they get here. And I've talked with him on the request, and he did indicate that the equipment that they would be sourcing would be the same stuff, so that the controls and all of the mechanisms of the equipment are all in the same place and whatnot. So the request is to take the ARPA grant that we already approved for them and repurpose part of it toward the equipment. Obviously, we've got some options on that. Alder Denny, I think you had a thought on the ARPA, so go ahead.
Well, yes, I hate to throw extra red tape downstream here, but just in interest of consistency, we typically have scored and ranked all these requests independently. And if we're going to repurpose the funding, would we have time and would it make more sense to at least rank it with the committee so that we compare it to everything else we've been putting the funding to it? It doesn't appear that it's going to be a problem, but for consistency, we've had other directors ask at the podium without the ranking process, and we've moved that they complete that so we have the full understanding.
I think there's merit in ranking. Even if we expect the item will score highly, I think that we'd have a consistent process. But separate from that, we'd have some good active documentation for why we fund what we fund and the things we approve. So if we would ever be asked to produce what the rationale was for spending the money, the more documentation we have that we were deliberative in that process, it's certainly good. Chief?
Sure, and I'm fine with whatever process. I mean, that's why I'm here. However you want me to seek your approval for this funding and where we're going to find it, I'm fine with that. But wheels are in motion also. I do not have a lot of time of leeway here. We have these firefighters arriving, we're optimistic mid-February. We're currently mid-week right now. We're doing 5 more interviews. We have 3 positions left to fill. When we started this, we had 5 positions open at the old number, plus the 12. We needed 17 positions. We've successfully started 3. We have 11 recruited and 3 positions open. So we're done really well in recruiting.
Good.
And the candidates that we're seeing this week are from the battalion chiefs, division chiefs that interviewed earlier in the week. Really good hires. So with that being said, we need to order this stuff in January. There's still going to be a delay. We're probably looking at renting some turnout gear for a short period of time, which we can do inside that budget. Obviously, with no other meetings yet this month, I'd be happy to write it, but then I'm going to need it to be fast-tracked through January. I can't let it go into February, because if you do not approve it, or the council does not approve it, then I'm looking at alternatives, and I've got new employees that I can't equip nor train. So that's the other element with this, is I don't know when. The request is twofold in the fact that half of the request is for North Central Technical College to get our employees enrolled into their paramedic program, and that will be starting also in February. And so I'm not sure what their timeline on for payment that is, probably near that start, I would imagine. So I've got some time, but not a lot of time. In January, I'm definitely going to need some answers.
Okay, so the ARPA surplus is actually the surplus from your previously approved allocation.
Correct.
Which covers all but $483 of this. I mean, we're there, basically. I mean, we can basically call it funded. So our ranking is largely a symbolic gesture. So, how do you feel about that, committee? Do you still want to go through? Because we have a meeting the second Tuesday of January 10th. And we don't meet before that. So we have basically the rest of this month to get it ranked, get the rankings in, and then we could discuss it on the 10th. We could send it to council the same night if it would need it to be fast-tracked. And by the 11th, it could be good to go. So, and with the assumption that the fact that this is so far funded, I think that it's safe for the chief to assume that we would support such a request because the money is already there. What do you guys think? Go ahead, Michael.
Yep. And I'm wondering too, if this request still kind of fits into the spirit of our ARPA allocation, because while these expenses may not have been originally budgeted in that first request for the 12 additional firefighters, this is still stuff that they need in order to get going. This is a cost that the department has to incur, because a firefighter cannot perform without, the necessary materials and gear, and plus the training. Well, the training is a little bit different because that was kind of, in order to get these people on board, we had to kind of change the kind of look at our requirements in that regard. But I still feel that this kind of fits within the scope of what the original request is, because this is something that they needed anyway. So, I'd see that the ranking to be purely, mostly symbolic. I don't think that, I wonder, I'm having a hard time wondering if this is something we actually need to do, because it still,
Sure.
it feels like it fits, it still fits into its original intent.
Well, ordinarily, the implication is that if you're going to hire an employee, you hire the employee with whatever related equipment it takes to do the work. I mean, you don't hire a police officer without guns and vests and things, so you don't hire paramedics without turnout gear and SCBA, so, and the proper training. So, it's up to you guys. I mean, we're certainly equipped to act on it tonight, do the shift and fund him right away. Or if we decide that we want to rank it, then I would ask that we finish the whole process on January 10th so that he has clarity. So, Doug, you look like you're
Yeah,
thinking.
well, he just prompted kind of a dumb question here. So we didn't necessarily plan on the training and the equipment when we budgeted for the slots. So if we would have filled them all, where would we be?
Well, there's a lot to that. It's difficult for us to telegraph long distance where we would be today when we began talking the discussion about the expansion of the department. I did not have numbers. I didn't have the knowledge of what, say, turnout gear when we're buying literally a dozen sets, what we could be doing for that. We hadn't entered in conversations with North Central Technical College because we hadn't lowered our requirements to EMT basic to paramedic. So a lot of these things have been in my office and for my staff been moving parallel. We've been hiring people. We've been, okay, here we've got to get equipment. We need to get bids on all these things. And so while it sounds, I wish I could have had those numbers for you when I was proposing the dozen new firefighters, and maybe I should have put a $250,000 mark on what it would cost to equip them, but we didn't at the time. We were worried about the wages, getting the positions created. Now we're in this position where we need to properly equip them. If there's blame to be put there, it can be permanently put on my shoulders, but we're doing the best we can to keep up with the fast pace at which we're going about this.
Well, I think the other question is, if those costs, like the cost of everything else, is it shifting with marketplace pressures and inflation and whatnot? So, I think what it maybe would have cost for all of that equipment when we bought the last round for everyone that was already there, is that price somewhat different today than it was a few years ago when we had to replace all of it because it all aged out basically at the same time. So,
Most of our vendors are telling us that their quotes are good for 60 to 90 days.
so there is market fluctuation then in all of that stuff too?
Large market fluctuation, yes.
That makes some sense. Go ahead, Doug.
All right, well, I hate to contradict myself, but I'm going to. And Mike makes a good point. I guess it's money we allocated to the fire department to get something done, and we can do it with this. I could go along with this as is, if ranking is going to delay the process.
Well, I guess it will or it won't, but the fact that the ranking is largely symbolic, the item is not on tonight's council agenda. So either way, whether we approve it tonight or not, it still goes to council on January 10th. It's just a matter of whether the council is getting it with some notice or if they're getting it from the committee the same night that, with no lead time. So if we approve it tonight, it goes through its normal flow and the council ratifies it on the 10th, but they also have some time to receive and evaluate the information from here, where if we do it on the 10th, they don't. So if you guys feel like you're equipped to pass it tonight and do the shift without ranking, I would take a motion to that effect.
I'll make that motion to
Okay.
approve without ranking.
All right, we have a motion from Martins. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, and a second from Denny. Additional discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None are opposed. That motion passes. Thank you. Okay, so then that brings us to item number 7, which is discussion and possible action regarding grant acceptance management policy. And you'll recall a couple meetings ago, we had talked about grants and how many of them there are to track. And Mary Ann was going to dive into the realm of trying to create a consistent policy. And so what we have in the packets is that draft. I guess, Mary Ann, do you want to walk us through a few of those clarifications?
Yep, so I submitted the first draft, I think it was in November. And then at that time, I said I wanted to send it to all of the stakeholders for feedback before I brought it back for final approval. I appreciated, I got a lot of good responses from the departments. Probably the biggest response I got, I think, was clarifying how grant reports should be approved. So if you recall, one of our findings this year was because grant reports were not being reviewed prior to submissions. And the review comment related to the Community Development Department. So they wanted an independent review and approval prior to submitting the report. So initially I had in there, because most of these are financial, that, finance would do the review. And the feedback I got back from departments was, well, we don't have a lot of time. I didn't get hurt feelings like, oh, Mary Ann, you're slow to respond, but I think that was partially it. So they wanted, to choose their independent review, which I think is a very fair comment. So basically, we changed it so that the policy requires that there shall be an independent review. But, if, for example, in the police department, a police officer or someone in their department has prepared the report, they can give it to their supervisor or another individual to review it, and then it can be shipped out. It doesn't have to be me, or it doesn't have to be the director. It's really about creating a system for that review so that there is an independent review prior to submission. So that was one of the kind of universal responses I got. And then the other one was basically, I think I had that there would be a committee or council review. I can't remember the exact initial language I had, but it didn't really specify what committees would review grant applications if a new position was created and established. So I just changed that language to say the Finance Committee and Common Council. And then I also got feedback from Greg Soibert that the FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, requires that the city adopted a resolution that delegated the application and grant execution to the mayor, which was passed back in 2010, Resolution 10-0605. And so it basically, the policy just acknowledges that so that the policy is in compliance with that resolution. And if you recall, the FTA kind of works in I don't want to use the word backwards, but, they're not always, because they're waiting on federal
It's a much slower
budget
process.
authority. Right, and so sometimes we don't even know what that grant is going to be until October of the year that we're in. And so this basically allows us, part of the that resolution allows us to run the program and kind of assume that funding is going to happen. And it, that's one of the reasons why the resolution exists. So
Okay.
those were the big changes.
Well, I think just so that I think it's good, first, in the policy that those grant reports will have an extra set of eyes on them regardless of whose eyes there are. I
Yep.
think it's good. I also think that putting us and the council in the role of approving grant applications that create future budget pressures, including new staff and new programs that will have revenue needs that may not necessarily always pay for themselves, is a good idea, because I think if we can understand the justification and the need for the program, be it long-term or short, it makes sense that we would be in the loop on making those decisions, because they'll have budgetary pressure. So, but if those are the, the three main points that we've achieved, that also really should get us, be an adequate response to the comment that you'd received on the budget review
Yep.
with the audit as well. So what are your thoughts, committee?
Did we set at one time some limitations or some minimums so that we're not
Yes.
having to come back for $1,000 grant?
Yes, so if the grant award exceeds 10,000, so that's really where the approvals are required. We would hope that, in all of the other procedures would be still followed, but as far as someone can accept a small grant without having to receive prior approval.
Sure, so those little ones they get for overtime for speed enforcement
Yep.
and safety belt stuff and all of
Yep.
that stuff can all be done without us.
Yes.
Okay, that makes some sense. Do we
And-
have a motion,
oh.
do you need action on this? Do you need us to
Yes,
approve the
please.
policy? So do
Yeah,
we have a
'cause then we
motion
would
to
send it to council
approve and
in
adopt the
January.
policy?
I would move to adopt the grant policy.
Okay, motion from Denny, is there a second? Second from Martins. Further discussion? Seeing none, then members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries, and that'll go forward to council as well, so they can all get a look at it too.
And then if, similar to our procurement, if we find that things aren't working, we can just bring it back
We can
and
make adjustments, yes,
modifications.
for
It's
sure.
not-
It's just good to at least have a published policy that we can start with as a shell, so. Okay, so item number 8 is discussion and possible action regarding bargaining agreement between the City of Wausau and the Wausau Firefighter Association for January 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2024. And, we've been working diligently, I think, for a number of months now to find a acceptable contract compromise with both of our public safety unions, and it looks like we are to that point. I understand that HR committee looked at these last night and approved them both, so the recommendation was that we follow suit. The high points of the contract are outlined in the table that's in the meeting packet. Does anybody have questions at all on those items? It does look like just about what we asked for in our last session, so none of it looked unexpected at all. Is there a motion to approve the agreement? Motion by Martins, is there a second?
I'll
Second by Denny. Further discussion or questions on the contract? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. Item number 9 is discussion and possible action regarding a bargaining agreement between the City of Wausau and the Wausau Professional Police Association for January 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2024. Same thing there. It's been a lot of discussion back and forth and a lot of compromise, but it looks like here they've emerged with a product that both sides seem to be able to live with. So HR, I believe, also supported this one last night. So is there a motion to accept this agreement as well?
I so move.
Motion by Martins, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Denny. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. I just want to take a second to thank everyone that was involved in the union negotiating process with our negotiating team, our staff. We've had our staff, our acting staff, we've had outside counsel, we've had bargaining teams from both departments, and they really have worked hard to find a quality product. So I have to say that on behalf of all of us, we really appreciate that effort. And, it took a long time, and there was a lot of back and forth, but it was certainly worth the effort. So thank you for that. That is the last agenda item we have, so I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion by Denny, is there a second by Martins? Members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, so we'll stand adjourned, and then common council will start in this chamber at 6:30. Thanks, everyone.
So